They were the white knights of the operating room, the doctors whose steady hands and solemn vows mended the frailest threads of life. We placed our trust in them without question, believing their scalpels carved paths to healing, their prescriptions a bridge back from the brink. But for these 10 physicians, the hospital became a shadowed stage, where compassion twisted into cruelty and the pulse of a monitor flatlined, not from illness, but from deliberate design. These are the harrowing true stories of healers who poisoned the very sanctuaries meant to save us, turning bedsides into burial grounds and exposing the terrifying fragility of the oath they swore to break. Case 1. Dr. Michael Swango, the angel of death's rounds. In the sterile halls of Midwestern hospitals, one resident's fascination with toxins turned routine checkups into fatal experiments no one saw coming. Michael Swango arrived on the medical scene like a prodigy sculpted from ambition and quiet intensity. Born in 1954 in Tacoma, Washington, and raised in the orderly streets of Quincy, Illinois, he was the middle son of a strict Army officer father and a devoted mother who shielded him from the family's unraveling fractures. His high school years painted him as the golden boy, valedictorian of his 1972 class at Quincy Catholic Boys High School, clarinet player in the marching band, and a young man whose disciplined gaze hinted at depths unspoken. After an honorable discharge from the U.S. Marines in 1976, where he honed a relentless commitment to physical fitness, he breezed through Quincy University, graduating summa cum laude in 1979 with accolades in chemistry that whispered of a brilliant future. Southern Illinois University School of Medicine welcomed him next, a place where his peers soon dubbed him 00 Swango, a nod to his cool detachment and rumored exploits with women that masked a growing unease. Classmates noticed his aversion to the grind of textbooks. He preferred the adrenaline of ambulance runs, lingering over dying patients with an almost reverent curiosity. Faculty whispered concerns. 5 patients under his watch coded unexpectedly during rotations. But Swango's charm and fabricated checkups in his OB/GYN clerkship kept expulsion at bay. He graduated in 1983, a year behind his class, his diploma a ticket to the neurosurgery internship at Ohio State University Medical Center in Columbus. There, in the buzzing corridors of a top-tier institution, he was seen as the eager resident, tall, fit, with a disarming smile that put nurses at ease and patients in quiet repose. No one yet glimpsed the shadow beneath, the boy who, as a child, had toyed with model guillotines, or the man whose journals would later reveal a thrill in orchestrating endings. The fracture came subtly, like a vein threading through marble in the winter of 1984. At Ohio State, Swango's rotations overlapped with a string of anomalies. Healthy patients seizing without cause, respiratory arrest that defied charts, and a nursing student who swore she saw him tamper with N4 just before one such collapse. 5 deaths rippled through the neurosurgery ward that year. Patients recovering from routine procedures who simply stopped. Nurses traded hushed accounts of Swango's lingering presence at bedsides, his unexplained absences during codes, but hospital leaders opted for internal reviews. Interviews that cleared him, suspicions dismissed as overwork or coincidence. Ohio State even recommended him for his medical license in March 1984, propelling him forward as his internship ended without renewal for residency. A quiet rejection he masked with forged optimism. But the poison seeped beyond patience. By July, Swango had pivoted to a paramedic role in his hometown of Quincy, Illinois, where the camaraderie of the Adams County Ambulance Service turned toxic. Colleagues began collapsing after shared meals. Violent vomiting, hair loss, convulsions that paramedics themselves could barely treat. One, a fellow EMT named Julie McDonald, retched for days after sipping coffee from a pot Swango had brewed. Whispers turned to accusations. Swango's apartment, searched by Quincy police in October 1984, yielded a chilling arsenal. Arsenic-laced ant traps, ricin recipes scrawled in notebooks, supersaturated cyanide solutions bubbling in jars. A mini laboratory of death hidden in plain sight. He had poisoned at least 5 coworkers, non-fatally, but with intent that chilled investigators. Doses calibrated not to kill outright, but to savor the suffering. What investigators found next would change everything. Ohio State, alerted by the arrest, launched a belated probe into Swango's internship. Franklin County prosecutors and the state medical board joined, sifting through ward logs and exhuming whispers from nurses too afraid to speak before. No hard evidence pinned patient deaths to him. Bodies long buried, autopsies inconclusive, but the pattern was damning. Swango's proximity to every collapse, his fabricated alibis. In August 1985, a Quincy courtroom became his first reckoning. Convicted of 4 counts of aggravated battery for the paramedic poisonings, he was sentenced to 5 years, serving just 2 before parole in 1987. The judge's gavel echoed a warning unheeded. This was no isolated lapse, but the prelude to a symphony of silence. Behind the image of respectability, something darker was growing. Released, Swango slithered through shadows, forging credentials under aliases like David J. Adams. By 1992, he infiltrated Sanford USD Medical Center in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, as a resident. Patients there began dying inexplicably, their charts marred by his innovative prescriptions. Fired after his past surfaced via an AMA background check, he resurfaced at Stony Brook University in New York, assigned to the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Northport. There, in 1993, the wards turned graveyard. Baron Harris, a 40-year-old veteran paralyzed by an unauthorized sedative injection, lingered in coma before dying on November 9th. Cynthia McGee, a 19-year-old crash survivor whose heart failed after Swango's solo visit, later revealed as a potassium overdose to mimic natural arrest. His girlfriend, Kristen Kinney, swallowed arsenic in a 1994 suicide, her body a testament to his influence. Suspicion escalated into pursuit as federal eyes sharpened. Kristen's mother tipped off authorities, prompting Stony Brook's firing and a nationwide blacklist from U.S. medical programs. The FBI, tipped by Ohio State's lingering regrets, built a dossier. Fraud warrants in 1994, just as Swango fled to Zimbabwe's Nene Mission Hospital. There, 7 patients poisoned, 5 dead, before arsenic traces in a landlord's hair sample, analyzed via Interpol in South Africa, forced his flight to Zambia and Namibia. Pathologist Stanford Mate and surgeon Michael Cotton in Zimbabwe pieced the puzzle, their reports screaming across oceans. Back stateside, Swango's bid for a Saudi job in 1997 lured him to Chicago's O'Hare Airport, where FBI agents cuffed him mid-stride, visa in hand, lies unraveling. The trial unfolded as a climax of exhumed truths. In March 1998, he pleaded guilty to federal fraud, drawing 3.5 years. But July 2000 brought the storm. Indicted for 3 New York murders, assault, and conspiracies, prosecutors unveiled his seized notebook, pages of glee at the rush of causing death, diagrams of toxin deliveries. Exhumed bodies from Northport yielded succinylcholine and arsenic. Ohio added Cynthia McGee's case. Her potassium spiked veins a smoking gun. On September 6th, before Judge Jacob Mishler, Swango folded, guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder, wire and mail fraud. He admitted paralyzing Harris, overdosing McGee, and lying about a 4th death. Sentencing followed swiftly, 3 consecutive life terms without parole, plus Ohio's aggravated murder plea in October, sealing his fate. In the supermax isolation of ADX Florence, where Swango requested solitary after a prison stabbing, the echoes linger. Up to 60 lives unclaimed by justice, a toll the FBI tallies in circumstantial shadows. His case ripped open the medical establishment's blind spots. Ohio State's superficial probes, the ease of forged paths, reminding us that the deadliest epidemics often wear the kindest faces. Trust, once broken in a hospital's hush, heals slowest of all. He chased the thrill of the final breath, until the silence he craved became his own. Case 2, Dr. Harold Shipman, the GP's silent syringe. trusted by an entire English town to ease their pains. He instead injected over 200 souls into eternity, often right in their own living rooms that doubled as his crime scenes. Harold Shipman entered the world on January 14, 1946, in the industrial grit of Nottingham, England, the second son of a lorry driver father and a mother whose quiet resilience shaped his early years. The family moved to Todmorden in West Yorkshire when he was young, a mill town where the air hummed with the steady rhythm of looms and the unspoken pressures of working-class life. Shipman proved an able student at high school, excelling in sciences with a focus that bordered on obsession, though classmates recalled him as reserved, polite but distant, the boy who preferred dissecting frogs in biology class to the rough games on the playground. His mother's death from lung cancer in 1963, when he was just 17, marked a subtle pivot, watching her gasp her last breaths at home, tended by a GP who administered morphine. He later claimed it inspired his path into medicine. Leeds University School of Medicine accepted him in 1965, where he met his future wife, Primrose, a fellow student whose steadfast support would anchor his facade for decades. Graduating in 1970, Shipman's early career gleamed with promise. He completed his house officer posts in Yorkshire, then joined Pontefract General Infirmary as a junior doctor, his competence earning nods from seniors. By 1974, he had settled into general practice at the Abraham Ormerod Medical Center in Todmorden, a stone's throw from his childhood home. Patients warmed to Dr. Fred, as he was known, a slim, bespectacled man in his late 20s with a brisk efficiency and a dry wit that masked deeper currents. He and Primrose built a life in a semi-detached house, raising 4 children amid the routines of school runs and Sunday roasts. When the practice relocated to Hyde in Greater Manchester in 1977, Shipman followed, opening his own surgery at Market Street Medical Practice in 1992. There, in the heart of this unassuming market town, he became a fixture, the doctor who made house calls without complaint, who lingered over tea with widows, his stethoscope a symbol of unwavering care. Elderly patients, many widowed and frail, filled his roster. Over 80% women, their trust absolute in the man who promised relief from arthritis aches or the loneliness of empty nests. No one saw the ledger he kept, the meticulous notes on doses that blurred the line between comfort and conclusion. The shift came not in thunder, but in the hush of a syringe, sometime in the mid-1970s. Shipman's first brush with darkness predated his solo practice. In 1975, at Pontefract, a colleague's death by opiate overdose raised eyebrows, though no charges stuck. But in Todmorden, the anomalies began, a cluster of patients expiring peacefully in their armchairs, certificates signed off with Shipman's flourish. He favored diamorphine, pharmaceutical heroin dissolved in saline, administered during those intimate home visits. The first confirmed victim, Eva Lyons, 70, breathed her last on September 16, 1975, her body discovered slumped by the fire. Shipman arrived moments later, pronouncing her gone with mechanical sorrow. Over the next 2 decades, the pattern etched deeper. 71 deaths in Todmorden alone, then 119 in Hyde, spanning 1975 to 1998. Victims like Kathleen Grundy, a fit 81-year-old former mayor, who texted her daughter, Angela Woodruff, a solicitor, about a new just weeks before her July 1998 death in her living room chair. Shipman claimed a heroin overdose from her own supply, but the autopsy whispered otherwise. No needle marks on her arms, lungs pristine for a supposed addict. He typed the will himself on his home computer, bequeathing £386,000 to him alone, a forgery so amateurish it would unravel everything. But soon, whispers began to spread, coiling like smoke through Hyde's close-knit lanes. Angela Woodruff, sensing the will's fraudulence, alerted police in August 1998. Greater Manchester Constabulary's initial probe stalled. Shipman's clean record, his patients' families' reluctance to doubt the man who'd buried their loved ones with gentle words. Yet forensic toxicologist Dr. Ian West's exhumations cracked the facade. Kathleen's body yielded 400 milligrams of diamorphine, a lethal bolus no self-medicating pensioner would hoard. Broader sweeps followed. 45 bodies disinterred from St. George's Churchyard in Hyde, their tissues laced with opiates far beyond therapeutic levels. Shipman's ledgers, seized from his surgery, tallied visits but omitted the fatal injections. Colleagues recalled his habit of certifying death solo, bypassing coroners with breezy assurances of natural causes. By March 1999, under Operation Lancet, detectives mapped 172 suspicious fatalities, interviewing shell-shocked relatives who pieced together the thefts. Shipman's kindness, visits often ended in sudden peace, followed by hasty funerals he recommended. A second forgery surfaced. Annie Campbell's estate rerouted to him, fueling charges of murder and deceit. Shipman, arrested in September 1998 and released on bail, maintained icy denial. His practice shuddered as the town reeled. What investigators found next would change everything. A trail of over 500 deaths linked to his care, the sheer volume forcing a public inquiry even as the trial loomed. In July 1999, Preston Crown Court indicted him on 15 counts of murder plus forgery, targeting women aged 41 to 81 whose final moments he orchestrated between 1995 and 1998. The three-month spectacle unfolded in October 1999, Justice Forbes presiding over a courtroom thick with grief. Prosecutors, led by Michael Shorrock QC, unveiled the autopsies. Morphine levels in victims like Bianca Pomfret, 62, and Jean Lilly, 59, that mimicked rapid respiratory failure. Shipman, defending himself after dismissing counsel, cross-examined pathologists with surgical precision, but his composure cracked under relatives' testimonies. Daughters describing mothers too lively for death. Sons recalling Shipman's oddly serene arrivals post-mortem. On January 31, 2000, after 6 days of deliberation, the jury returned unanimous guilty verdicts on all 15 murders and one forgery. Justice Forbes sentenced him to life imprisonment with a whole life tariff, the first such order in English history, declaring, "The sheer scale of your crimes is almost unimaginable from a man in a position of trust." Shipman offered no remorse. His parting words a curt, "I am innocent." The aftermath rippled like aftershocks through a fractured trust. Confined to Franklin Prison in Durham, Shipman fashioned a ligature from bedsheets, hanging himself on January 13, 2004, the day before his 58th birthday, leaving notes of defiance and a void of answers. The Shipman Inquiry, chaired by Dame Janet Smith, commenced in 2000, its first report in July 2002 confirming 215 murders, with suspicions of 45 more. The toll, mostly widows in their armchairs, exposed a killer who preyed on isolation, his motive an inscrutable God complex rather than gain. Reforms followed. Mandatory second signing for death certificates, centralized opiate tracking, a national medical performers list to bar the ghosts of fraud. Hyde mourned not just the lost, but the innocents shattered. Patients who once viewed their GP as savior now eyed stethoscopes with wariness. Shipman's legacy endures as a caution. In the quiet administration of care, the deadliest hands can be the most familiar. If cases like this fascinate you, subscribe to the Crime O'Clock, where every mystery has a ticking timeline waiting to be uncovered. He prescribed peace to the living, until the grave prescribed it back to him. Case 3, Dr. John Bodkin Adams, the compassionate killer. In the sun-dappled drawing rooms of Eastbourne seaside villas, a physician's gentle hand on a morphine syringe promised mercy, but for over 130 patients, it delivered only the final, unforgiving silence. John Bodkin Adams was born on June 21, 1899, in Wareham, Dorset, into a lineage of quiet privilege and quiet contradictions. The son of a Methodist minister father who died young and a fiercely independent mother, Ada, he grew up in the shadow of religious expectations that chafed against his emerging pragmatism. Educated at a Quaker school and later at the University of London, Adams qualified as a doctor in 1925, his early years marked by a nomadic drift through general practices in East Croydon and Worthing. Tall and angular, With wire-rimmed glasses and a penchant for bow ties, he projected an air of old-world courtesy, charming widows over sherry, quoting poetry to ease their ailments. By 1929, he had settled in Eastbourne, the elegant Regency resort on England's south coast, where the air carried salt and the promise of genteel retirement. There, he joined a partnership with Dr. Reginald French, but it was Ada's influence that steered him toward the lucrative niche of geriatric care. Elderly patients, often affluent and alone, whose chronic pains he soothed with house calls that lingered into evenings of companionship. Adams's persona solidified in the 1930s as the town's angel of death, a moniker whispered in admiration, not alarm. He lived modestly in a terraced house on De Laval Road, tended by his devoted housekeeper, Molly, yet his social orbit glittered with the silver-haired elite of Eastbourne's villas. Patients like Gertrude Hodsole, a widow of means, welcomed him as confidant and caretaker. He managed their investments, drafted their wills, and in return received lavish bequests, motor cars, jewelry, even his famed Rolls-Royce, a gift from one grateful soul. By the 1940s, his practice swelled to over 750 patients, 90% over 65, many bedridden in nursing homes like the Devonshire or the upscale Park House. Adams was a fixture at bridge tables and garden parties, his dry humor disarming suspicions of the oddities. Patients who rallied under his care only to fade swiftly after a restorative injection. World War II saw him serve as an anesthetist in local hospitals, his steady hands earning commendations. But it was post-war, amid ration morphine and unchecked prescriptions, that his routine deepened into ritual. No wife, no children, just Molly, a parade of dachshunds, and the quiet satisfaction of estates that flowed his way, totaling over £80,000 by the 1950s, a fortune that raised no flags in a town grateful for his tireless rounds. The moral boundary cracked not in a single storm, but in the incremental haze of euthanasia, as Adams later termed it, a philosophy born, he claimed, from battlefield mercies and his mother's own dignified decline. The pivot crystallized around 1946 with Edith Alice Morell, a 66-year-old widow and former patient whose spinal cancer confined her to bed in Eastbourne's Beresford House nursing home. Morell, sharp-witted and litigious, had already sued Adams once for overprescribing sedatives. Undeterred, he resumed her care in October 1950, administering nightly injections of morphine and heroin under the guise of pain relief. Her daughter, Mrs. Reginald Rice, noted the rapid deterioration, from lucid conversations to slurred whispers within weeks, Morell moaning, "Is this necessary, doctor?" On November 11th. Adams persisted, his charts cryptic, injection as before, escalating doses to 1.5 grains of morphine per night, a level toxic to the non-tolerant. By November 13th, she was comatose. 2 days later, at 10:45 a.m., she expired, Adams at her side, certificate citing myocardial degeneration. In her will, revised under his guidance just months prior, Morell left him £37,597, nearly £500,000 today, along with her antique furniture and a pearl necklace. It was a pattern etched across decades. Over 163 suspicious deaths between 1946 and 1956. Victims like Amy Alice Farrow, 61, who bequeathed him £4,000 after a similar syringe symphony in 1950, or Claire Millicent Fox, whose estate poured £30,000 his way post-1949. Adams's motive blurred gain and godhood. Easing suffering, he insisted, while pocketing the gratitude. But soon, whispers began to spread, threading through Eastbourne's tea rooms like the sea mist rolling in from the pier. The catalyst was Morell's daughter, horrified by the will's haste and her mother's fragmented final days. In 1955, she confided in a solicitor who tipped off Scotland Yard. Chief Inspector Herbert Sparrow arrived in July 1956, his team sifting Adams's ledgers. Entries of no high pen, a heroin brand, and H. Injection spiking before each death, no corroborating notes on consent or decline. Over 130 exhumations were considered, but only 5 proceeded. Morell's body, exhumed from Eastbourne's Auckland Cemetery, yielded traces of barbiturates and opiates consistent with overdose, though decomposition masked precision. Pathologist Dr. Francis Camps's report was damning. Death accelerated by injections, the quantities in excess of therapeutic needs. Adams's home yielded a pharmacy of excess. Bottles of morphine sufficient for an army, wills tucked in drawers like trophies. Colleagues, grilled in marathon interviews, recalled his casual dismissals. Old people die, don't they? And nurses who averted eyes from his solo certifications. By December 1956, the net tightened. Adams arrested on Christmas Eve for Morell's murder, plus forgery and perjury charges tied to 3 other deaths. Farrow, Fox, and Julia Straker, 68, whose 1950 passing netted him £5,000. Released on £7,000 bail, posted by sympathetic patients, he retreated to De Laval Road, the town divided. Petitions with 1,200 signatures begged his freedom, while graffiti scarred his door. What investigators found next would change everything. A web of complicity in the medical fraternity, where Adams's peers had long overlooked the Mercy killings as eccentric compassion. The director of public prosecutions, Sir Theobald Matthew, greenlit the case despite Home Office qualms over euthanasia precedents, but the trial became a spectacle of restraint. On March 18, 1957, at Lewes Assizes, Justice Patrick Devlin presided over a courtroom swarming with Eastbourne's elite, peers in the gallery, press sketching Adams's impassive profile. Indicted solely on Morell's murder to avoid jury overload, prosecutors, led by Christmas Humphreys, dissected the timeline. October's baseline pain managed with aspirin, escalating to heroin by November. Morell's own diary, protesting the unnecessary doses. Adams took the stand, his testimony a masterclass in deflection. I aimed to ease her suffering, he averred, claiming her moans were agony's cry, not protest. But Camps's forensics pierced the veil. Morphine metabolites in her liver, injection sites on thighs hidden from family view. The defense, spearheaded by Norman Burkett QC, humanized him, a saintly overworker, his will's pure philanthropy. After 4 days, on March 26th, the jury deliberated 90 minutes before acquittal. Devlin's direction emphasizing proof beyond doubt, the euthanasia defense muddying intent. Dropped charges followed. Adams walked free to applause, his practice revived by waiting patients. The aftermath settled like Eastbourne fog, thick with unresolved shadows. Adams resumed his rounds until retirement in 1983, dying unprosecuted on July 4, 1983, at 84, from cerebral arteriosclerosis, certified, ironically, by a colleague. The 1957 scandal birthed the Adams Report, a 1961 Home Office probe into euthanasia laws, deeming it not murder if consented, though consent's proof remained elusive. Eastbourne's trust fractured, nursing homes installed oversight, opiate prescriptions scrutinized, revealing 400 more potential victims in Adams's orbit. His estate, swollen by bequests, funded dachshund charities, a final irony. The case lingers as a mirror to medicine's gray zones, where mercy's mask conceals control and the healer's oath bends under the weight of unchecked power. In the end, the compassion he wielded became the ambiguity that set him free. His mercy was measured in milligrams, until the scales of justice tipped beyond his grasp. Case 4. Dr. H. Holmes, the murder castle chemist. Posing as a healer in 1890 Chicago, he designed a 3-story trap of gas chambers and acid vats disguised as a hospital, where patients vanished like smoke. Herman Webster Mudgett, who would cloak himself in the respectable mantle of Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, entered the world on May 16, 1861, in the sleepy farming hamlet of Gilmanton, New Hampshire, the third child of a devout Methodist family whose stern piety clashed with his budding deviance. Tall and slender even as a boy, with piercing gray eyes and a disarming smile, Young Herman was the village oddity. A voracious reader of Poe and anatomy texts, he terrorized classmates by dissecting a schoolmate's prized fox under the guise of curiosity, his hands steady as he peeled back fur and flesh. Accusations of cruelty swirled, locking playmates in barns to watch them panic. But his charm deflected blame, earning him a scholarship to the University of Vermont in 1878, where he dabbled in pharmacology and vanished debts. By 1882, at the University of Michigan Medical School in Ann Arbor, Mudgett honed his surgical skills, but whispers followed. Cadavers mutilated in the lab, insurance scams on dissected horses sold to suppliers. He graduated in 1884, a certified pharmacist with a wife, Clara Lovering, and a son left behind in New Hampshire as he drifted west, bigamy his first quiet rebellion. Chicago beckoned in 1886, a city of smoke-belching factories and boundless ambition, where the Great Fire scars had birthed a frenzy of rebuilding ahead of the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition. Mudgett reinvented himself as Dr. Holmes, purchasing a drugstore at the corner of Wallace and 63rd Street in the working-class Englewood neighborhood. With his clean-shaven jaw and wire spectacles, he projected the archetype of the progressive physician, prescribing tonics to laborers, flirting with female clerks, and marrying, then abandoning his second wife, Myrta Belknap, for a third, Minnie Williams, whose inheritance he siphoned. By 1888, he had bought the adjacent vacant lot, commissioning a 3-story hotel under the name World's Fair Hotel, ostensibly for exposition visitors. Contractors came and went, fired abruptly, their payments withheld, leaving Holmes to labor in secrecy, his blueprints a labyrinth of deceit. Over 60 rooms connected by staircases that dead-ended into walls, doors opening to chutes dropping into basements lined with lime pits and acid vats. The upper floors housed soundproof vaults disguised as storage, gas jets rigged for asphyxiation, and a crematory oven source from a medical supply house. To the neighborhood, it was a pharmacy annex with boarding rooms. To Holmes, it was his castle, a self-proclaimed torture palace where he lured the vulnerable under pretenses of employment or healing. The fracture deepened in the summer of 1890 as the hotel's construction masked its true foundation, a killing ground calibrated for the fair's influx. Holmes's first victims were likely the nameless, transient workers swallowed by the city, their insurance policies cashed in Holmes's name. But the pattern escalated with trust. Julia Connor, his childless housekeeper and lover, pregnant by him in 1891, begged for an abortion in the basement surgery. Holmes obliged with chloroform and a scalpel, but her screams drew her husband, Ned, a watchmaker. Both vanished, their bones later unearthed amid the quicklime. Minnie's sister, Nanny Williams, arrived from Texas in 1893, only to tour the guest suites before asphyxiation in a sealed chamber, her body dissolved in acid. The fair's whirl, over 27 million visitors, provided cover. Young women answered ads for typists, vanishing after interviews. Benjamin Pitzel, Holmes's imprisoned partner in fraud, was lured to Philadelphia in 1894 with a promise of $10,000, only to be gassed and dismembered in a rented house, his fingers mailed piecemeal to throw off pursuit. Holmes's ledger of death tallied at least 27 confirmed, though he boasted 200. Motives a cocktail of greed, embezzled estates, thrill, the power of the final gasp, and erasure, rivals silenced in vats. The hotel's pharmacy fronted it all. Patients treated for nerves with laced elixirs, their recoveries feigned until the inevitable relapse in a locked room. But soon, whispers began to spread, carried on the fair's dying embers like ash from a pyre. As the exposition dismantled in October 1893, Englewood locals murmured of the hotel's peculiarities. Unexplained fires in the basement, the nightly wails nurses swore were wind, and the parade of young women who checked in but never out. Holmes fled west in 1894, abandoning the castle to arsonists, likely his own hand, to conceal the horrors, the flames devouring evidence but not suspicion. Pitzel's wife, Carrie, reported him missing to Philadelphia police, her children's pleas drawing Detective Frank Geyer, a methodical Pinkerton operative whose dog trail would unravel the web. Geyer's investigation ignited in July 1894. Pittesell's trunk, containing his false teeth and a bloody suit, surfaced in a rail depot. Holmes, traced via telegrams, was arrested in Boston on a horse theft warrant, his pockets stuffed with aliases and many stolen bonds. Back in Philadelphia, under duress from detectives, Holmes confessed fragments, Pittesell's murder for insurance, but the castle called louder. Chicago police, tipped by Geyer's reports, raided the gutted hotel in August, unearthing the macabre. A 3-foot-deep pit of bones and women's clothing, rusted gynecological tools stained with residue, and trapdoors leading to the crematory's warped grate. Over 200 workers were quizzed. One, carpenter Robert Latimer, recalled sealing a screaming room on Holmes's orders. The toll mounted. Alice and Nellie Pittesell, ages 15 and 11, exhumed from Toronto cellars. Howard, 8, from an Indianapolis stove. Holmes's fevered plot to hide them from their mother, whom he had convinced of Pittesell's flight. What investigators found next would change everything. A national scandal that branded Holmes the first serial killer of the American age. Extradited to Philadelphia, he faced trial in October 1895 for Pittesell's murder. The castle's atrocities folded into motive. Moyamensing Prison became his confessional stage, where he penned a 250-page memoir, part boast, part fabrication, detailing asphyxiations, vivisections, and the fair's hunting season. The courtroom, packed with reporters from Hearst's empire, crackled under District Attorney Francis Grundy's cross-examination. Holmes, shackled and defiant, claimed spiritualist visitations urged the killings, but Geyer's testimony sealed it. 3 child corpses, their identities etched in Holmes's own hand. The jury, after 5 days, convicted on first-degree murder November 30th. Appeals dragged to 1896, but Governor Robert Patteson denied clemency. On May 7th, Holmes was hanged in Philadelphia's Moyamensing Yard, his neck snapping clean at 10:13 a.m., body encased in concrete to thwart grave robbers. His final irony. No remorse in his last words. "Take that, you fiends." The aftermath etched Holmes into infamy. The castle razed in 1938 for a post office that locals shunned as cursed. His crimes birthed forensic reforms, centralized missing persons bureaus, scrutiny of medical fraud, and exposed the Gilded Age's underbelly, a city of dreamers preyed upon by its architects of nightmare. Up to 200 untraced souls haunt the estimates, a reminder that the most monstrous designs often hide in plain sight, blueprint by those we anoint as saviors. In the end, the healer who built walls to trap life found his own unyielding. He constructed a palace of promises until the foundations crumbled beneath his throne. Case 5. Dr. Mario Jaskelevich, the Karari Shadow. At a bustling New Jersey hospital in the late 1960s, a surgeon's hidden cache of exotic paralytics turned recovery rooms into roulette wheels of breath, where one wrong dose meant eternal stillness. Mario Esteban Jaskelevich was born on April 20th, 1927, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, into a world of faded aristocracy and unquenched ambition. The son of a civil engineer father and a schoolteacher mother, he grew up in the tango-shadowed streets of the capital, a boy whose sharp features and sharper mind marked him as destined for more than the family's modest means. Jaskelevich excelled at the elite Colegio Nacional de Buenos Aires, his dissections in biology class earning him a reputation for precision that bordered on the chilling. By 1952, he had graduated from the University of Buenos Aires Medical School, his thesis on surgical techniques a nod to his fascination with control over the body's mechanics. Drafted into Argentina's military as a surgeon during Perón's turbulent reign, he honed his skills in field hospitals, where the line between saving and selecting blurred under gunfire. Discharged in 1955, he married his first wife, a nurse named Elsa, and emigrated to the United States in 1960, chasing the American dream with a J-1 visa that morphed into citizenship through sheer tenacity. Riverdale Hospital in Oradell, New Jersey, became his proving ground in 1962, a modest 100-bed facility in the leafy suburbs of Bergen County, serving a mix of blue-collar workers and middle-class families who trusted its white-coated guardians implicitly. At 35, Jaskelevich cut a striking figure. Dark-haired, impeccably tailored, with a thick accent that lent exotic charm to his bedside manner. He joined as a general surgeon, his appendectomies and cholecystectomies lauded for their finesse, earning him privileges in the operating theater and a private practice that swelled with grateful patients. Divorcing Elsa for an American colleague, Diane, he settled into a split-level home in nearby Ridgewood, driving a Cadillac and hosting barbecues where his tales of Argentine gauchos masked a growing isolation. Colleagues admired his work ethic, on call 24/7, volunteering for the ER's chaos, but noted his volatility, outbursts over sloppy nurses, a fixation on sterile fields that verged on paranoia. By 1965, he had become Riverdale's unofficial patriarch, training residents and charming the board with promises of expansion. No one questioned the locked drawer in his office, or the unmarked vials he sourced from a shadowy New York supplier. Curare, the Amazonian dart poison that paralyzed without trace, his insurance against surgical surprises. The boundary shattered in the spring of 1966, amid the hum of Kennedy-era optimism, when Riverdale's surgical ward became a gallery of ghosts. It began with Carl Moskowitz, a 43-year-old father recovering from hernia repair on April 29th. Post-op, he convulsed, his lungs seizing as if drowned from within, dead by dawn despite frantic intubation. Investigators chalked it to embolism, but the echo came swift. Over the next 18 months, 23 patients followed. Men and women aged 18 to 89, their charts a mosaic of routine procedures derailed by inexplicable respiratory arrests. Emanuel Greenberg, 55, flatlined after gallbladder surgery in July 1966, his wife weeping as monitors wailed. Months later, 18-year-old Sean McCarthy, a traffic accident victim, gasped his last in recovery, his mother inconsolable. Jaskelevich wasn't always the surgeon. Sometimes the anesthesiologist, sometimes just the consultant who lingered, but his shadow loomed. Witnesses recalled him injecting something extra into IVs during rounds, his syringe glinting under fluorescent lights. Curare, odorless and rapid, mimicked natural failure. Muscles frozen, heart racing to collapse, leaving no autopsy hallmark beyond vague anoxia. Motive eluded, not gain, as estate stayed untouched, not grudge, victims strangers. Perhaps it was the god's whim, a surgeon's itch to test the edge where life yielded to command. But soon, whispers began to spread, slithering through the hospital's corridors like the toxin itself. By late 1967, the death rate, 87 in 18 months, far above national averages, alarmed the nursing staff. Florence Halsey, head nurse, tallied the anomalies in a secret ledger. 80% under Jaskelevich's purview, clusters post-op when he covered shifts. She confided in Dr. Stanley Harris, a rival surgeon whose own patients survived unscathed, igniting a covert feud. Harris leaked concerns to the Bergen County Medical Examiner, Dr. John Kearns, who ordered selective autopsies. Lungs congested, but toxicology clean. Frustration mounted. Halsey and her ally, pathologist Arthur Donoso, smuggled tissue samples to private labs, but results stayed elusive. Enter the Riverdale Seven, a core group of whistleblowers, nurses, and aides, who approached the FBI in January 1968, their affidavits painting Jaskelevich as the specter. Overheard boasting of perfect kills, seen discarding green-tinted vials in the incinerator. Prosecutor Leo Rosenblatt's task force descended in March, seizing records. 1966 to 1967 logs showed Jaskelevich administering 1,200 injections, many undocumented medications. Raids on his home and office yielded the jackpot. 60 tubes of Curare, expired and potent, hidden in a basement safe, sourced illegally from a Manhattan importer who fingered Jaskelevich as a bulk buyer since 1965. Polygraphs pinned for nurses. Jaskelevich, evasive under questioning. invoked his accent as misunderstanding. What investigators found next would change everything. A medical cold case thawed by science's grudging advance. Exhumations of Moskowitz and Greenberg in May 1968 revealed curare metabolites, detectable only via newly refined chromatography, a breakthrough from Columbia University labs. The toxin, derived from condrodendron plant bark, lingered in fatty tissues, its signature a telltale arrow in the quiver of proof. Jaskelevich's alibi crumbled. Flight manifests showed him in Argentina during a conference when a vile shipment arrived. Indicted April 2nd, 1968, on 5 counts of first-degree murder, the 7 confirmed via curare traces. He posted $300,000 bail, his practice suspended as Riverdale shuttered its ORs. The trial, dubbed Dr. X, gripped New Jersey from May to November 1969 in Hackensack's Bergen County Courthouse, Judge Joseph Thuring presiding over a media circus. Prosecutor Rosenblatt, with FBI toxicologist Dr. Arthur Umberger, mapped the timeline. Jaskelevich's curare purchases spiking pre-death clusters, witness sketches of his mystery shots. The defense, led by Raymond Brown, spun accident, botched anesthesia experiments, not malice, citing Jaskelevich's military heroism and a forged expert claiming therapeutic curare for spasms. But the jury, after 13 weeks of testimony, deliberated 15 hours before acquittal on December 1st. Reasonable doubt, they cited in the toxin's legal novelty and absent direct witnesses to injection. Cheers erupted. Jaskelevich, tear-streaked, hugged his second wife, vowing vindication. The aftermath draped Riverdale in perpetual twilight. The hospital demolished in 1971, its site a weedy lot shunned by locals. Jaskelevich fled to Argentina in 1970, dying of a stroke in 1984 at 57, his innocence proclaimed but doubted. Estimates whisper 87 victims, a shadow, unlitigated. The case forged protocols, mandatory drug logs, peer reviews for anomalies, the rise of forensic tox screens that caught later killers like Shipman. Bergen County's grief lingers in the what-ifs, families who buried doubts with their dead, a reminder that the deadliest shadows cast longest in places sworn to light. Power, unchecked in a scalpel's grip, can paralyze more than flesh. He wielded paralysis as a secret art, until the evidence refused to stay buried. Case 6. Dr. Jayant Patel, the butcher of Bundaberg. Hailed as a surgical savior in an Australian outback hospital, his bold techniques butchered 87 lives, leaving a town questioning every scar they bore. Jayant Patel emerged from the bustling chaos of Mumbai in 1950, the son of a general practitioner father whose clinic in the teeming Dadar district doubled as a classroom for young Jay's early fascination with the scalpel. Raised in a Brahmin family where medicine was both vocation and virtue, he navigated the competitive corridors of Grant Medical College at the University of Bombay, graduating in 1973 with a degree that promised escape from the city's relentless grind. Tall and composed, with a measured voice that carried the cadence of his homeland, Patel was the archetype of the diligent immigrant doctor, ambitious, unflappable, and ever ready with a reassuring nod. By 1977, he had landed in New York for surgical training at the State University of New York Downstate Medical Center in Brooklyn, where his steady hands on gallbladders and colons earned passing marks. The whispers of haste lingered among residents. Marriage to Marie, a fellow Indian doctor, grounded him. Together they built a life across oceans, chasing opportunities in the West's gleaming ORs. Australia called in 1986, its vastness a canvas for Patel's ascent. He settled in Brisbane at the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, then the Princess Alexandra, where he specialized in upper gastrointestinal surgery, resections for cancers of the esophagus and stomach, procedures demanding precision amid frailty. By the mid-1990s, he was a senior surgeon, his logbook boasting over 3,000 operations, credentials polished enough to overlook the occasional botched anastomosis or overlooked bleed. Colleagues noted his confidence bordering on bravado. Jay the Knife, they dubbed him, for incisions that flew fast, complications dismissed as part of the game. In 2003, seeking a slower pace, he relocated to Bundaberg, a sun-baked sugar town of 50,000 in Queensland's outback, with a Bundaberg-based hospital served as the region's lifeline. Understaffed, underfunded, a pressure cooker of emergencies from cane field accidents to the cancers of aging farmers. Patel joined as a locum, then director of surgery, his CV a shield against local scrutiny. To the community, he was a godsend, the exotic specialist who flew in from the city, operating solo on weekends, his white coat a beacon in the hospital's fluorescent haze. Patients like Mervyn Morris, a 75-year-old with bowel woes, pinned hopes on him. Staff, stretched thin, hailed his willingness to fill gaps. No one delved into the red flags from Brisbane. Suspended privileges in 2003 for unnecessary surgeries that left patients ventilated for weeks. The crack widened in the humid summer of 2003 when Patel's boldness metastasized into catastrophe. Bundaberg Base, with its 200 beds and rotating roster of juniors, became his unchallenged domain. He performed 457 procedures in 11 months, splenectomies on stable patients, bowel resections without biopsies, his knife carving through tissues with a haste that invited infection. The first alarms sounded with 61-year-old Ian McIver. Admitted for a hernia in October 2003, Patel opted for exploratory laparotomy, nicking the aorta in a spray of blood that took hours to staunch, leaving McIver septic and comatose. He lingered 18 days before death, his family shattered by the routine turned ruin. The cascade followed. 75-year-old Deidre Stein, her colon perforated during cancer surgery in November, festering untreated until peritonitis claimed her. Darren Weir, 39, a fit roofer whose ulcer repair in December unraveled into multi-organ failure from an overlooked leak. By March 2004, the morgue overflowed, 13 deaths in 3 months, all under Patel's blade, autopsies revealing sloppy sutures, missed malignancies, antibiotics withheld as unnecessary. Not malice, but hubris. Patel overrode nurses' pleas for CT scans, dismissed juniors' hesitations, his God complex unchecked in Bundaberg's isolation. The toll climbed to 87 suspected, a butcher's ledger hidden in the haze of complications. But soon, whispers began to spread, crackling through Bundaberg's cane fields like dry lightning. It ignited with nurse Tony Hoffman, a veteran of the surgical ward whose gut twisted at the anomalies. Infection rates triple the norm, patients fleeing to Brisbane for second opinions. In March 2004, after 75-year-old Lynn Watkins died from a bowel prep gone septic, Patel's laxative overdose ignored, she penned an anonymous letter to Queensland Health Minister Wendy Edmund, detailing the death factory. The missive, leaked to the Courier Mail, exploded. Headline screamed DR. Death, prompting Premier Peter Beattie's emergency cabinet meeting. The hospital's chief, Dr. Peter Leck, stonewalled initially. Patel's results are fine, but Hoffman's testimony to the Davies inquiry, launched April 2004, peeled back the veil. Subpoenaed records revealed Patel's Brisbane suspension for 15 adverse events, including a 1998 splenectomy that eviscerated a pancreas. Queensland Health's credentialing? A rubber stamp, no checks on his lapsed registration. By May, Patel fled to Oregon, but the probe deepened. 28 exhumations ordered, though decay limited findings. Survivor accounts poured in. Farrell's colostomy bag spilling from a botched closure, his life upended. What investigators found next would change everything. A systemic rot that dwarfed one man's flaws. The Davies report, tabled in September 2004, indicted not just Patel but the bureaucracy. 27 deaths directly attributable, 60 more suspicious, with Patel operating 22% of cases despite warnings. His techniques, rudimentary by Brisbane standards, thrived in Bundaberg's vacuum, where no senior oversight existed. Extradition loomed. Patel, arrested in the U.S. on an Australian warrant in 2005, fought via appeals, but Queensland's persistence prevailed. The trial opened in June 2010 at Brisbane Supreme Court, Justice Richard Chesterman overseeing a 3-month marathon. Indicted on 17 manslaughter counts, deaths from 2003 to 2004. Prosecutors, led by Peter Davis QC, dissected videos of Patel's surgeries. Hasty clamps, ignored alarms, his voice barking faster at trembling assistants. Expert witnesses, including Sydney's doctor, David Koss, lambasted the cowboy cuts, perforations sealed with hope, not skill. Patel, extradited and defiant, took the stand. "I saved more than I lost," he claimed, blaming understaffing. But the jury, unmoved, convicted on 10 counts in August 2010. Manslaughter, not murder, intent absent, but recklessness glaring. Sentenced in December to 15 years, halved on appeal to 7. He served 3 before parole in 2013, deported to India with a lifetime ban from Australian practice. The aftermath scarred Bundaberg like a keloid. The hospital rebuilt at $100 million, but trust eviscerated. Patients driving hours to Brisbane, staff haunted by ghosts. The Garling Inquiry of 2008, spurred by Davies, overhauled national standards. Mandatory peer audits, whistleblower protections, a do-not-employ registry that snared Patel's ilk. Hoffman, hailed a hero, penned Hell's Kitchen, her memoir a testament to moral courage. Patel, now 75 and obscure in Gujarat, embodies medicine's peril. When isolation amplifies ego, the healer's hand becomes the reaper's. In remote wards, where need outstrips scrutiny, one flawed blade can carve a town's soul. He cut corners to conquer the outback, until the wounds he left demanded their own reckoning. Case 7. Dr. Christopher Dunch, the spine snatcher. In Dallas operating rooms, a neurosurgeon's innovative cuts promise mobility, instead delivering paralysis and death to 33 patients on his bloody tables. Christopher Dunch was born on April 3, 1971, in Memphis, Tennessee, the eldest son of a schoolteacher mother and a father who managed a tire store. Their modest home a launch pad for a boy whose intellect burned bright but erratically. Tall and athletic, with a quick laugh and a knack for mimicry, young Chris dazzled in high school theater, his charisma a shield against the undercurrents of instability. He breezed through the University of Memphis on a track scholarship, earning a chemistry degree in 1994, then pivoted to medicine at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis, graduating in 2000 amid whispers of erratic rotations. Later rivals dismissed concerns from faculty about his grasp of anatomy. Undeterred, he matched into a neurosurgery residency at the University of Missouri in Columbia, a grueling 7-year gauntlet where his peers marveled at his bravado, boasting of revolutionary techniques gleaned from labs, charming nurses with impressions of TV surgeons. By 2007, board-certified and married to his second wife, a nurse named Shelley, Dunch relocated to Dallas, the epicenter of Texas medicine, where Baylor Regional Medical Center at Plano welcomed him as an attending. At 36, he cut a compelling figure, broad-shouldered, silver-tongued, with a LinkedIn profile touting cutting-edge, minimally invasive spine surgery and a side hustle in stem cell research. Patients, desperate for relief from herniated discs and sciatica, flocked to his office in the Medical City Dallas complex, drawn by promises of life-changing procedures. Colleagues saw a driven innovator, no one yet the architect of agony. The descent began in the crisp air of July 2012, when Dunch's scalpel first betrayed the vow etched in his residency vows. His first case at Baylor, 74-year-old Floella Brown, admitted for a routine L5-S1 fusion to ease chronic back pain. What should have been a 2-hour operation ballooned into catastrophe. Dunch severed Floella's iliac artery, flooding her abdomen with blood. He packed the wound with cement meant for her spine, then fled the room mid-crisis, leaving residents to suture the hemorrhage. She survived the night but slipped into multi-organ failure, dying 4 days later on July 23. Dunch dismissed it as complications, his charts vague on the arterial nick, the misplaced screws that shredded her nerves. The pattern etched forward. In August, 45-year-old Mary Efford, a vibrant grandmother, entered for a cervical disectomy. Dunch drilled into her healthy vertebrae, implanting 2 screws that pierced her esophagus and jugular vein. Blood poured in her throat. She awoke paralyzed from the neck down, her voice a rasp of betrayal. By fall, the tally mounted. Jerry Summers, 46, a former musician, rendered quadriplegic after a misplaced rod snapped his spinal cord. 61-year-old James Davis, whose C6 fusion left him ventilator-bound. His final breaths a gurgle in October 2012. Dunch's innovations, off-label drills, experimental glues, weren't advances but improvisations born of sloppiness, his ego blinding him to the screams echoing from recovery bays. Over 18 months across 3 hospitals, he mangled 33 spines. 2 dead on the table, 31 survivors in wheelchairs or graves, their lives unspooled by a man who chased acclaim over competence. But soon, whispers began to spread, seeping through the sterile corridors of Dallas's medical maze like antiseptic fumes. It started with the nurses, Kim Morgan, Dunch's surgical assistant and sometime lover, who quit in horror after Floella's death, her text to him pleading, "You are a sadist." By November 2012, Baylor revoked his privileges, but he slithered to Dallas Medical Center. Then Baylor Garland, his reputation a vapor trail of charm. Patients sued. Efford's malpractice claim in 2013 unearthed or videos. Dunch fumbling instruments, ignoring alarms, his voice a manic patter over monitors' wails. The Texas Medical Board, prodded by complaints from 10 victims' families, launched a probe in early 2013, seizing logs that revealed 100 adverse events in 18 months. Paralysis rates 100 times the norm. Dr. Robert Henderson, a veteran neurosurgeon at Baylor, became the quiet crusader. After operating on Summers, he pored over Dunch's cases, his report to the board a litany of egregious errors, screws in throats, cement in veins, a vertebra chipped like glass. Henderson's persistence drew the Dallas Morning News, their 2013 expose, Killer on Call, igniting outrage. 20 lawsuits filed, hospitals scrambling to notify 3,000 patients. Dunch, undaunted, texted boasts of saving lives, even as warrants loomed. Arrested in July 2013 on drug charges. Hydrocodone hoarded for his own habit. He posted bail, only for the net to tighten with felony assault indictments by 2014. What investigators found next would change everything. A trail of hubris etched in bone and blood, forcing medicine to confront its gatekeepers. The Collin County DA's office, led by prosecutor Michelle Slaughter, built the case not on serial murder. Texas law's bar too high without intent to kill, but on aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, the scalpel. Raids on Dunch's apartment yielded pill bottles and a journal of delusions. I am ready to leave the love and kindness and goodness and go on to the next step, which is the war, he scrawled in 2013. Or footage from 38 surgeries, subpoenaed from hospitals, played like horror reels. Tools dropped into open wounds, nerves snipped like threads. By 2015, 2 more deaths. Summers in 2013 from sepsis in his paralysis, and 55-year-old Jennifer Lovelace, whose 2012 fusion devolved into fatal hemorrhage, pushed the count to 4 homicides, but charges stuck to assault. The trial commenced February 2, 2017, in Dallas's Frank Crowley Courts building, Judge Dale Rampey presiding over a gallery thick with wheelchair-bound survivors. Slaughter's opening salvo. This defendant was a never-was who dreamed he was a has-been. Witnesses piled on. Efford wheeling to the stand, her voice steady. He stole my life. Experts dismantled Dunch's defense of bad luck, Henderson testifying to intentional harm. The video showing not error, but indifference. Dunch, pudgy and sullen in khakis, claimed addiction fogged his hands. His attorney, a last-minute appointee, floundered. After 2 weeks, the jury deliberated 18 hours before guilty verdicts on 1 murder, Mary Efford's assault, elevated by harm, and 2 aggravated assaults. Life without parole slammed down April 4, 2017, Texas's first conviction of a doctor for harming patients in surgery. The wake trails like scar tissue across Dallas's skyline, where hospitals now mandate proctoring for new surgeons in real time or oversight. Dunch, 53, rots in Hunt County Jail, his appeals denied, a pariah whose story fueled HBO's The Surgeon's Cut and podcast dissecting the D.R.D. myth. Victims' families founded advocacy groups, their scars a spur for the 2019 Texas law capping malpractice damages. Too little, they say, for the lives rewired in ruin. His case unmasks the fragility of expertise. When charisma eclipses skill, the operating table becomes an altar to folly, and trust, once severed, rarely mends clean. He promised to fix broken backs, until his own arrogance left him irreparably confined. Case 8. Dr. William Husel, the opioid overlord. At Ohio's Mount Carmel hospitals, massive fentanyl boluses were ordered for comfort care, but for 25 souls, they were the final, unforgiving flood. William Scott Husel was born on October 3, 1973, in Perry County, Ohio, a rural patchwork of rolling hills and tight-knit communities where the Husel name evoked quiet reliability. The son of a factory worker father and a homemaker mother, he grew up in the shadow of New Lexington High School, where his lanky frame and easy grin masked a drive that propelled him through Ohio State University, earning a biology degree in 1996. Medicine followed like destiny. Accepted to Ohio State's College of Medicine, he graduated in 2000, his white coat a symbol of the American heartland's faith in its healers. Residency in anesthesiology at Ohio State honed his focus on the delicate dance of sedation, dosing propofol and fentanyl to blur the edges of pain during codes and surgeries. By 2006, Husel had settled at Mount Carmel Health System in Columbus, a network of 3 bustling hospitals, West, East, and St. Anne's, serving 1.5 million Ohioans with a steady pulse of a nonprofit giant. At 33, he was the picture of suburban success, married to his high school sweetheart, Amy, with 2 young daughters, a weekend golfer who volunteered at church fundraisers, his 6'4" frame filling doorways with a reassuring presence. Colleagues knew him as the cowboy, a nod to his flair for high-stakes resuscitations, his pager always first to respond in the ICU's frenzy. Patients' families praised his empathy, the doctor who knelt by bedsides, murmuring assurances amid beeps and tubes. Mount Carmel's ICUs, understaffed and high volume, leaned on him. Night shifts where he soloed intubations, his orders for comfort, meds a bomb in the endgame of sepsis or strokes. No one yet saw the overdose in his compassion, the way his doses dwarfed protocols like a flood breaching a levee. The levee broke in the dim-lit hours of December 2015, when Husel's generous pharmacology turned terminal care into termination. It started with 70-year-old Beverly A. in Mount Carmel West's ICU, a pneumonia patient whose family begged for peace as her lungs failed. Husel, on call, ordered 1,000 micrograms of fentanyl, 10 times the standard bolus for agitation, followed by another 1,000, her monitors flatlining within minutes. Certificate, pulmonary failure. The pattern pulsed forward over 3 years across all 3 hospitals. 26-year-old Stephanie J., brain dead from a fall in 2017, given 2,000 micrograms for. Her young husband left clutching a teddy bear. 88-year-old William P., post-heart attack at St. Anne's, whose 500 microgram propofol chase ended in asystole, chalked to multi-organ dysfunction. Husel's signature, megadoses of fentanyl, up to 5,000 micrograms, Precedex, and paralytics like rocuronium, administered not in drips, but bolts that mimicked natural arrest. Respiratory collapse indistinguishable from disease. Over 1,100 orders reviewed, 35 patients died within 30 minutes of his interventions, all non-survivors in futility discussions where he positioned as the merciful arbiter. Motive blurred into delusion. Husel later claimed acute awareness of suffering, his doses a gift to spare agony, but charts showed healthy vitals pre-bolus, families uninformed of the deluge. The toll, 25 confirmed, perhaps 50 more in the haze of end-of-life euphemisms, his rounds a shadow ritual in the 9 p.m. quiet. But soon, whispers began to spread, threading through Mount Carmel's nursing stations like frayed 4 lines. It ignited in late 2017 at West, where ICU charge nurse Mariam tallied the anomalies. Husel's patients crashing post-order, nurses overriding pumps to have doses, their notes pleading per protocol. By spring 2018, a cluster of 20 deaths in months, against a baseline of years, alarmed the pharmacy. Fentanyl usage spiked 20%, far beyond peers. An internal audit, sparked by a pharmacist's flag on a 3,000 micrograms order for 41-year-old Chase S., uncovered the excess. Doses 10 to 20 times norms, signed off solo by Husel, who bypassed colleagues with stat urgency. Nurses, fearing retaliation, leaked to the Columbus Dispatch in June 2018 their anonymous pleas. He's killing them, unleashing a firestorm. Ohio's Department of Health descended, seizing records, 2,300 charts, 500 autopsies greenlit, toxicology revealing fentanyl levels in tissues that screamed overdose, arterial concentrations 100 times lethal thresholds. Husel, suspended July 2018, vanished on vacation to Florida, his Facebook frozen on family selfies. The FBI joined, probing as manslaughter. Mount Carmel fired him amid 23 lawsuits. The board's mea culpa, a press release admitting oversights in oversight. What investigators found next would change everything. A conspiracy of silence in a system starved for scrutiny. State pathologists, led by Dr. Anai Orrego, exhumed the pattern. 25 deaths directly tied from 61-year-old Donna B. In 2015 to 80-year-old Mary Y. In 2018, all with Husel's bolus as the accelerant. His defense? Therapeutic intent, but emails unearthed showed him coaching nurses on aggressive palliation, his text to Amy boasting big saves. Indicted June 2019 on 25 counts of murder. Ohio's first doctor charged as such, plus 128 felonious assaults. The case ballooned to 46 victims by trial. Franklin County Common Pleas Court hosted the spectacle starting February 2020. Judge David Fays presiding over a masked, pandemic-era chamber. Prosecutor Timothy Merkel painted Husel as death dealer. Autopsies proving no natural decline. Fentanyl flooding systems of patients minutes from extubation. Nurses testified in tears. One recounting overriding a 4,000 micrograms order, saving a life. Another admitting complicity in silence, fearing job loss. Husel, bearded and hollow-eyed, took the stand. I acted from love, he intoned, but cross-examination shredded it. His residency logs clean, no peer support for megadoses. After 6 weeks, the jury deliberated 4 days before guilty verdicts on 14 murders and 28 lesser assaults in April 2021, acquittals on 11 where evidence thinned. Sentenced June 2021 to 20 years to life per count, concurrent, with parole eligibility at 209 years. Husel bowed his head, the gavel a punctuation on mercy's perversion. The ripples flooded Ohio's medical corridors. Mount Carmel paying $45 million in settlements, its ICUs retrofitted with dose caps and ethics rounds. The 2022 Ohio law mandating opioid audits and whistleblower shields rose from the wreckage, a bulwark against compassion fatigue, masking excess. Husel, 51, languishes in Chillicothe Correctional, his appeals a whisper. Families, from the young to the elderly's kin, find no solace in verdicts, only the hollow echo of trust betrayed. His saga unmasks the opioid era's dark twin, when pain's relief becomes its executioner, and the healer's heart, unchecked, drowns the oath in delusion. In the end, the doses he deemed deliverance became his unyielding sentence. He flooded the dying with finality, until the law's tide rose to claim him. Case 9. Dr. Leonardo Casaniga, the delirium of dominance. In an Italian emergency ward, a doctor's omnipotent sedations claimed 8 lives, blurring the line between healer and the god he longed to be. Leonardo Casaniga stepped into the world on March 28, 1956, in the industrial haze of Arese, Lombardy, the son of a factory foreman and a seamstress whose modest home echoed with the discipline of routine. A lanky boy with a mop of dark hair and eyes that seemed to dissect rather than observe, he excelled at the local lyceum, his affinity for biology drawing him toward the precision of medicine. By 1981, he had graduated from the University of Milan Medical School. His thesis on anesthesiology, a harbinger of his fixation on control, the body's betrayal under sedation, the quiet power of syringe. Early postings in small clinics honed his skills, but it was Serrano Hospital, a mid-sized facility in the shadow of Milan's sprawl, that claimed him in 1993. At 37, Cazzaniga cut an imposing figure, broad-shouldered, authoritative in his white coat, with a baritone voice that commanded operating theaters and a penchant for quoting Dante to flustered interns. He specialized in emergency anesthesiology, the night shift guardian who stabilized the crashing, heart attacks in the rain-slick streets, overdoses from the factory's endless shifts. Colleagues respected his efficiency, dubbing him the fixer. Patients, groggy in recovery, murmured thanks for the painless drift into oblivion. Married briefly in his youth, with 2 children grown distant, Cazzaniga lived alone in a sterile apartment overlooking Serrano's cobbled piazza, his evenings lost to medical journals and the occasional affair that whispered of deeper hungers. By the early 2010s, he was the ward's unchallenged patriarch, his shifts a blur of intubations and boluses, the hospital's understaffed bustle his unchallenged domain. No one yet parsed the delusion blooming. His private emails, later seized, revealing a man who styled himself omnipotent, toying with life as a deity might with clay. The fracture fissured in the fluorescent chill of 2013, when Cazzaniga's interventions crossed from salvation to sovereignty. Serrano's emergency department, overwhelmed by Lombardy winter's toll, pneumonia's strokes, the elderly's brittle falls, became his canvas. The first shadow fell on November 17th. 61-year-old Giuseppina Di Leo, a retired teacher admitted for respiratory distress, stable after initial care. Cazzaniga, covering the graveyard shift, entered her bay alone at 2 a.m., syringe in hand. What nurses called a routine sedative was potassium chloride, 20 milliequivalents, a cardiac toxin that seized her ventricles into fatal arrhythmia. She coded minutes later, revived briefly before asystole claimed her at dawn. Certificate, natural cardiac arrest. The echo multiplied. Over 2 years, at least 11 patients followed, their charts a litany of abrupt halts. 78-year-old Massimo Pagnin, post-appendectomy, injected during a check on December 3, 2013, his monitor flatlining from hyperkalemia. 84-year-old Ida Perro, frail from dementia, silenced on March 22, 2014, her family bidding farewell to a body chilled by overdose. Cazzaniga's method was meticulous, potassium, laced into IVs or pushed direct, mimicking electrolyte storms common in the elderly. 8 hospital victims, plus 3 more in collusion with lover Laura Tironi, a nurse whose bed he shared. Their affair, ignited in 2012, twisted into conspiracy. He dosed her estranged husband, Marco Musso, 38, with sedatives in 2013, staging a suicide by pills. Her mother, Maria Domenica Pezzoli, 67, overdosed in 2014 under his home visit. Her father-in-law, Giuseppe Bernardi, 69, followed in 2015, his death paving their path to union. Motive for the patients? A God complex, prosecutors later argued, clearing beds, asserting dominance in the ward's chaos. For the lover's kills, raw possession, Tironi's whispers urging remove the obstacles. But soon, whispers began to spread, coiling through Serrano's night nurses like the chill off Lake Maggiore. It unraveled in the summer of 2015, when a junior resident, rattled by a cluster of sudden stops under Cazzaniga's watch, flagged the pattern to the head of anesthesiology. 5 deaths in 3 months, against a baseline of years, prompted an internal audit. Toxicology on archive samples yielding potassium spikes defying physiology. Nurses, long cowed by his temper, came forward. One recalled his solitary adjustments to drips Another his eerie calm during codes he seemed to orchestrate. The spark leaped to Varese prosecutors in September 2015, their task force, dubbed Operation Diabolical Lovers, wiretapping Casanega's phone, capturing boasts to Tironi of perfect endings. Raids on November 29, 2016, yielded the arsenal. Unmarked vials of potassium in his locker, deleted texts plotting Musso's demise. Tonight, the lights go out. Exhumations followed. Pagnan's heart tissue laced with chloride, Pecororo's kidneys crystallized from excess. Interrogations cracked accomplices. Tironi, crumbling under pressure, confessed fragments, implicating Casanega as the architect. By December, 18 suspicious deaths mapped, his affairs trail leading to 3 domestic murders. Casanega, arrested in surgical scrubs, maintained a sphinx's silence, his apartment barren save for a journal of fevered musings on divine intervention in the vein. What investigators found next would change everything. A tapestry of complicity woven through Serrano's ranks, where fear silenced alarms. Forensic reconstructions simulated 4 pushes on cadavers, mirrored the victims' trajectories. Potassium surge, a mere 30 seconds to irreversible fibrillation. Digital forensics unearthed 200 emails between lovers, coded lingo for kills, the eagle flies for clearance. The probe ballooned to 20 potential victims, but evidence pinned 14. Indicted in 2017 on 11 counts of aggravated murder. 8 hospital, 3 personal. Casanega's trial fused with Tironi's in Busto Arcisio's Palace of Justice, opening January 28, 2020, before Judge Pasquale Nobile DeSantis. The chamber, heavy with families' grief, echoed with pathologist testimonies. Dr. Cristina Cattaneo detailing the signature hyperkalemia, non-natural in stable patients. Prosecutors painted Casanega as a black angel, his god delusions fed by unchecked power. Defense countered mercy killings, citing his empathy for suffering. Tironi, testifying tearfully, flipped. He convinced me it was kindness. After 10 months, on January 29, 2020, verdicts thundered. Life for Casanega on all 11, 30 years for Tironi on 3. Appeals carved revisions. Milan's 2021 ruling upheld life for 10, 8 patients, 2 of Tironi's kin, acquitting 1 hospital death for insufficient proof. A 2023 retrial added Domenico Brasca's murder, stealing 11 lives. Casanega, unrepentant to the end, spat, "I healed more than I harmed." The aftermath cloaks Serrano in a pall that time hasn't lifted. The hospital's ER retrofitted with dual-sign protocols and AI-monitored drips. A €2 million overhaul born of scandal. Italy's medical code tightened. Mandatory reporting of anomalies. A national registry for angel of death flags. While Tironi, paroled early in 2024 for good behavior, vanished into witness protection, her children severed from the legacy. Casanega, 69, endures life in Opera Prison's isolation wing, his appeals exhausted, a specter whose delirium exposed the ward's fragility, where exhaustion breeds blindness, and one man's omnipotence can eclipse the pulse of many. Trust in Scrubs, once absolute, now demands vigilance, a hard-won lesson etched in Lombardy clay. He sedated the line between life and judgment until the courts awakened to his fever dream. Case 10. Dr. Huan Lin, the herbal horror. In remote Chinese clinics masquerading as hospitals, his miracle tonics vowed cures, yet poisoned over 100 into convulsions, all in pursuit of fraudulent fame. Huan Lin was born in 1949 in the rugged hills of Shaanxi province, amid the seismic upheavals of Mao's New China, where survival meant blending traditional grit with revolutionary fervor. The son of peasant farmers whose fields yielded little but resilience, Young, who grew up in the shadow of Yan'an, the communist cradle, his early years marked by the privations of the Great Leap Forward, famine's hollow cheeks, the party's endless drills. A bright but restless boy, he bypassed formal schooling for apprenticeships in local apothecaries, absorbing the lore of roots, and rhizomes from elders who whispered of qi imbalances cured by decoctions. By the 1970s, during the Cultural Revolution's tail end, who had maneuvered into a barefoot doctor's role in rural communes. His herbal poultice is a patchwork fix for fevers and fractures. Tall and gaunt, with a perpetual squint from poring over yellowed texts, he projected the aura of the sage healer. Clad in threadbare tunics, quoting the Huangdi Neijing like scripture, his voice a measured rumble that soothed the illiterate masses. In 1983, he formalized his ascent at Xi'an Medical University, earning a basic degree in traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, though skeptics later unearthed forged transcripts. By the mid-1990s, who had carved a niche in Hunan Province's Luoyang region, opening the Jixing TCM Hospital in 1996, a squat, two-story affair in the dusty outskirts, it signed promising ancient wisdom for modern ills. Patients streamed from afar, cancer sufferers shunning chemo, stroke victims spurning rehab, drawn by tales of whose divine hands that realigned meridians with mere pinches. To the villagers, he was a folk hero, his fees nominal, his bedside tales of imperial elixirs a tonic in themselves. State oversight, lax in the post-mal thaw, let him thrive. No one probed the locked storeroom where he brewed his brews, or the growing pile of recovered testimonials he peddled to credulous press. The schism cracked open in the sweltering summer of 1997, when Hu's quest for quackery crested into catastrophe. His signature cure, Jixing Shini, a murky slurry of herbs and undisclosed additives, later analyzed as laced with aconite, Caowu, a neurotoxin, licorice root overloads, and arsenic traces, promised to expel evil winds from chronic ailments. The pivot victimized 66-year-old Zhang Yulan, a breast cancer patient from nearby Zhengzhou, who arrived in June emaciated but alert, her family pooling savings for Hu's 3-week regimen. Daily infusions of the brew, administered in the hospital's dim infusion ward, began innocently. Nausea, then tremors. By day 10, convulsions racked her frame, heart racing to fibrillation. Who dismissed it as toxin release, upping the dose to 500 milliliters. On July 19th, she seized in her cot, foaming at the mouth, dead before the village ambulance, state-run and hours away, could rumble in. Certificate, relapse of malignancy. The blight spread unchecked. Over 18 months, 109 patients ingested the fatal formula, 100 succumbing to aconite's arsenic-like assault, paralysis, ventricular tachycardia, renal shutdown mimicking disease progression. Wang Xia, 42, a diabetic whose cure triggered hyperkalemia in August 1997. Li Wei, 71, stroke-afflicted, whose brew induced cerebral edema by October. Whose hospital doubled as death den. Wards crammed with the dying, relatives herded into waiting rooms with promises of imminent turnaround. Motive fused fraud and fantasy. Who hawked his tonic nationwide via bootleg videos, amassing 2 million yuan in donations, his ego inflated by a 1996 state nod for innovative TCM, a rubber stamp he flaunted like a mandate from heaven. But soon, whispers began to spread, rustling through Hunan's cotton fields like the wind before a dust storm. The dam broke in January 1998, when the People's Daily ran a terse item on unverified herbal deaths in Luoyang, sparked by a whistleblower nurse, whose cousin, torn by conscience, who tallied 20 burials in 3 months from her ledger. Families, long silenced by grief and gratitude, converged. Zhang's daughters stormed the clinic, demanding exhumations. A coalition of 50 kin petitioned the Hunan Health Bureau, their placards decrying poison cures. Provincial investigators, dispatched February 1998, sealed Jixing. Autopsies on 15 exhumed bodies. Zhang's liver swollen with aconite alkaloids, Wang's blood arsenic at 50 times lethal, screamed foul. Whose storeroom yielded 200 liters of the sludge. Lab tests confirming unregulated Caowu extracts, far beyond TCM safety caps. Interrogations peeled the layers. Who admitting experimental dosages but claiming good intentions. his ledgers forged with phantom recoveries. The probe rippled national. 89 more clinics shuttered, whose videos yanked from markets. By March, he fled to Shaanxi hideouts, but state security netted him in Xi'an, his arrest televised, a gaunt figure in handcuffs, muttering of persecution by Western medicine. What investigators found next would change everything. A syndicate of silence spanning TCM's underbelly, where profit trumped proof in the reform-era scramble. The Ministry of Health's task force, led by forensic toxicologist Dr. Li Jian, mapped 192 suspicious cases across whose network, patients lured by his miracle myth, death certified by bribed local coroners. Chemical breakdowns exposed the bruise alchemy, aconite's fatal pseudoephedrine spikes, licorice-induced pseudoaldosteronism flooding kidneys, whose confessions, extracted over 72 hours, unveiled the delusion. I sought to rival Qigong masters, he rambled, tying his tonics to failing gong fringes, a nod to the era's spiritual fervor. Indicted April 1998 on 11 counts of intentional injury leading to death, China's homicide statutes bending from medical malfeasance. The trial unfolded in Luoyang Intermediate People's Court that summer, a stark chamber under Judge Wang Wei's gavel. Prosecutors, wielding autopsy photos like indictments, chronicled the carnage. Zhang's final spasms, captured in smuggled video. 100 victims' graves, clustered like accusations. Who, defended by a state-appointed counsel, pleaded negligent excess, blaming impure herbs. But witness after witness, nurses admitting overlooked warnings, relatives recounting his sales pitches, built the wall. After 3 days of closed sessions, the verdict dropped August 15th. Guilty on all counts, 15 years imprisonment, a 500,000 yuan fine, and license revocation. Who served 9, paroled in 2007 for reform, vanishing into obscurity. Rumors place him hawking teas in rural markets, unrepentant. The fallout reshaped China's healing haze. The 1998 scandal birthing the state administration of TCM, dosage registries, randomized trials for miracles, a purge claiming 300 frauds. Jixing's ruins sprouted a state clinic, its walls a mural of licensed herbs. Families received modest compensations, though Zhang's daughters still light incense yearly, their faith in folk cures charred. Whose shadow lingers as a parable of the post-Mao pivot. When tradition collides with unchecked ambition, the village healer becomes the village haunt, and the elixir of hope curdles into poison. In the end, the fame he fermented turned to the bitter dregs of infamy. What's your take on this story? Share your thoughts below and subscribe to the Crime O'Clock, because the next mystery is already ticking. He brewed legends from leaves, until the roots of truth unearthed his grave design.